Times Square is the beating heart of New York City, a dazzling explosion of lights, movement, and energy, a place where millions gather, and where the city shows its most iconic face to the world.
But Times Square did not begin as the dazzling heart of New York that we know today. In the early years of the 20th century, this place was still called Longacre Square, a district filled with carriage makers, horse stables, and small workshops. It smelled of hay, manure, and industry, far from the glamour and light we now associate with it. Well, everything was about to change, and the symbol of that transformation was a building. In this image from 1903, we see the New York Times building under construction. Steel beams rise into the sky, surrounded by scaffolding, as workers balance on planks and the skeletal frame of the tower begins to dominate the skyline. On the street below, horse-drawn wagons and early electric streetcars fight for space, while pedestrians weave through the noise and dust. This unfinished structure represents more than just another office building. It is the physical embodiment of New York's unstoppable ambition at the dawn of the century. Fragile in appearance, yet already monumental in meaning. The decision to build the Times headquarters here was bold. At the time, this intersection of Broadway and 7th Avenue was not considered prestigious. But Adolph Ochs, the visionary publisher of the New York Times, believed in its potential. He saw not just an intersection, but the future center of the city. In this illustration of the completed building, we glimpse how that vision was imagined. Tall, elegant, crowned with flags waving in the wind, the Times building was meant to be a beacon. At 25 stories high, it would briefly become the tallest building in New York. More than just offices, it was a symbol, a statement that the newspaper would rise above all others, literally and figuratively, anchoring the transformation of Longacre Square into something new. And that transformation came quickly. In this image from 1904, we look upon Longacre Square, just before it was renamed Times Square. At the center, the nearly finished Times building towers above the older, low-rise brick structures that still line the streets. Around it, shops advertise their goods, signs cling to narrow buildings, and horse-drawn carriages fill the dusty roads. But the future is already written in stone. That year, Mayor George B. McClellan, Jr. officially renamed the square Times Square in honor of the newspaper that had staked its claim here. With a single gesture, the identity of the neighborhood changed. What was once a place of tradesmen and stables now bore the name of modernity, media, and ambition. And from that moment forward, this square would no longer be ordinary. The renaming was more than symbolic. It marked the start of a tradition that would cement Times Square as the heart of the city's celebrations. On December 31, 1904, the Times inaugurated its new headquarters.
In this image from New Year's Eve, 1905, we see the very first great celebration at the new Times building. Crowds gather at the base of the tower, bundled in winter coats, staring upward as fireworks burst into the night sky. The air is thick with smoke and cheers. More than 200,000 people fill the square, celebrating not just the turn of the year, but the arrival of a new era. This was the beginning of Times Square as the city's gathering place, a tradition that would only grow larger with each passing year. Beyond the fireworks, Times Square was already becoming a symbol to be shared, reproduced, and remembered. In this 1905 postcard, we see Times Square through a romanticized lens. Printed in vivid colors, the image transforms the intersection into a postcard-perfect scene. The Times building, tall and majestic, the streets filled with energy, the entire place elevated into something iconic. For the first time, Times Square wasn't just a location in Manhattan. It was a symbol, a piece of New York that could be carried home in someone's pocket. The everyday life of the square was no less extraordinary. In this image from 1906, we see the bustling heart of Times Square by day. Electric streetcars roll past, crisscrossing the wide avenues, while horse-drawn carriages still cling to the old ways, weaving through the chaos. Pedestrians flood the sidewalks, moving between theaters, shops, and restaurants. Rising above it all is the Grand Hotel Astor, a Beaux Arts masterpiece that had already become the center of social life in the district. Its elegant facade and luxurious interiors hosted banquets, political meetings, and performances, a symbol of wealth and culture planted firmly in the heart of Times Square. By 1906, the Crossroads was no longer just the home of the New York Times. It was becoming something bigger, a place where the city itself came to celebrate, to connect, and to see the future unfold before their eyes.
By 1907, the fireworks displays at the Times building had already become a tradition. But this year, the celebration would take on a new form, one that would forever define Times Square in the eyes of the world. In this image from December 31, 1907, we see the very first ball drop. Suspended from the mast of the Times building, a giant iron and wood sphere, illuminated by 125-watt bulbs, slowly descended to mark the new year. The crowd below, tens of thousands of New Yorkers, gasped as the glowing ball slid downward against the dark sky, landing with precision at the stroke of midnight. Fireworks followed, and cheers erupted through the cold winter night. From that moment on, the ball drop became an inseparable part of New Year's Eve in Times Square, a ritual that continues more than a century later. In this image from 1908, we see the Times building towering above 42nd Street and the bustling Longacre Square, now fully transformed. Horse-drawn carriages are still present, but electric streetcars dominate the avenues, moving crowds swiftly through the city's beating heart. But perhaps the most striking transformation came after sunset. In this image from 1908, we see Times Square at night. The scene glows with electric light, reflected off the windows and shimmering across the wet pavement. Street lamps and illuminated signs pierce the darkness, transforming the square into a spectacle of modernity. Crowds gather, their faces lit by artificial light, marveling at a city that no longer belonged to the cycle of the sun. For the first time, New York was truly becoming the city that never sleeps. Another view from 1908 shows the square from a different angle, with the Times building rising defiantly above the chaos of traffic and noise. The avenues are crowded, the sidewalks overflowing, the advertisements louder than ever. By now, Times Square had claimed its place not just in New York, but in the imagination of the entire country.
By 1909, the transformation of Times Square was impossible to ignore. In this image from 1909, we see the Hotel Astor standing proudly in the heart of Times Square. Its Beaux Arts facade stretches across an entire block, elegant and commanding, with flags fluttering above its rooftop. Beneath its grand arched windows, carriages line up to deliver guests into a world of luxury. Inside, the hotel offered ballrooms, banquets, and lush interiors that rivaled anything in Europe. It was here that politicians gathered, that celebrities dined, that New Yorkers celebrated in style. The Astor was not just a hotel. It was a social stage, a reflection of the glamour that Times Square was quickly becoming. Decades later, in 1967, the hotel would be demolished, another reminder that in New York, even icons can vanish. But in these early years, The Astor was the crown jewel of Times Square, the place where elegance met spectacle. By the 19-teens, the square itself had outgrown its infancy. In this image from the 19-teens, we see Times Square alive with energy and fully established as the beating heart of New York. The streets are overflowing with people, the sidewalks lined with theaters and shops, and the glow of electric lights more powerful than ever before. The Times building still dominates the scene, but it is no longer alone. New structures are rising, advertisements are larger, and the rhythm of the city is unmistakable. In less than a decade, this place had transformed from a forgotten intersection into the most recognized crossroads in America. Times Square was now more than the home of a newspaper or a hotel. It was the home of celebration, of progress, of modern life itself. And as the years went on, its reputation only grew. Every New Year's Eve, the world looked to this square. Every night, the lights reminded the city and the world that New York was a place of endless ambition. The early photographs you've just seen capture not only the physical transformation of a neighborhood, but the birth of a symbol. From steel beams in 1903 to neon glow in the 19-teens, Times Square became something far greater than its streets or its buildings. It became the heartbeat of a city, and eventually, of the entire modern world.
If you've enjoyed this journey through time, make sure to give this video a like. It really helps more people discover it. And if you want to keep exploring New York's past with us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss the next story. Times Square was born more than a century ago, but its light still burns today.